Hello and welcome to another May 365 discussion. And today I'm Bryton, going to be talking about managing Surface devices with Endpoint Manager. So this is really covering, I guess, the way to use Surface devices with Intune. Of course, it's been rebranded to Endpoint Manager with their SCCM merge as well. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just flick to my slides. And I'll go through there. Now I am on fixed wireless here, so I'm going to cut my video to conserve bandwidth. So let me just turn that off and let's go. So again, welcome. Name is Bryton Wishart. I'm a solution architect for NTAG, and today we're going to talk about managing Surface devices with Endpoint Manager, and more importantly, focus on four of the key policies I always deploy for customers. Like to respect our traditional owners of the land that we speak upon, and including the our New Zealand friends and colleagues. Code of conduct for M365 May: be constructive, respectful, be helpful, and be kind. There's a larger version on the website that you can have a read through for further. Our goals today is really to prove why Surface devices should be managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And to demonstrate the four must-have policies. Now, when I talk about end-to-end management, we're actually talking things from the firmware all the way through to the OS and the user policies. So, there are some limitations we have currently, and with the new Surface announcement that came out yesterday, there are more devices that we can do end-to-end. Now, I guess why Endpoint Manager? One, it's a cloud-native device management platform. It's more than just Windows and Surface devices. It can do your mobiles, it can do Mac, it can do Android. So you can really have one device management platform across all your different systems. So the Surface devices currently that will provide you the greatest experience when working with Intune and managing end-to-end is currently the Surface Pro 7, Surface Pro X, the Surface Pro 3 laptop, and the new devices that were announced yesterday, though I'm still yet to see any documentation updated from Microsoft stating that they'll support the UEFI management. But I would assume they would, because that has been the strategy with the newer devices. I guess, what are the requirements for this? To manage the Surface devices end-to-end, there are some requirements you do need, especially around the UEFI management. So one, you need to have Azure AD Premium 1, and that is important. You need to obviously have Microsoft Endpoint Manager licensing, so Intune licensing, Enterprise Mobility Suite plus security, or a Microsoft 365 license. Your Surface devices have to be deployed via Autopilot. And more importantly, those Autopilot devices have to be registered by either a reseller or a distie. So you can't self-provision these devices. It means you do need to log into the portal or have your reseller log into the partner portal and deploy the devices that way to your system. And ideally, you need to have a Surface device to manage a Surface end-to-end. So, that's kind of make sure you've got the correct hardware, have the back-end licensing, have the back-end systems all running together. And that is important. So one of the first things, I guess, when we start to dive into this is how do we segment everything out? And one of the ways I love to do that is with dynamic groups. So again, if you look at dynamic groups, brilliant way for you to manage policies that you want done at a device level. So a prime example of that is, we're talking UEFI management. There are only certain Surface devices that currently support UEFI management. And it's important that when we're building these dynamic groups, we build a group just for those devices, and then we build another group that will cover all Surface devices. And this comes down to how we want to deploy policies, whether it's at a device level and a user level. And from experience, I tend to use both depending on what the policies are. A security policy that needs to be deployed to every single device or every single Surface device should probably be done at the device level, opposed to a user level. That way, it doesn't matter what user logs into that device, that policy is applied. And and especially when we're talking the UEFI or what they call the DFCI policy in Intune, is that's a device policy. We want that firmware. We want the UEFI environment to be locked down. It's a security risk to leave that open, and this day and age, a lot of customers I walk into, the UEFI environment on all their devices isn't locked down. It's open slather. It doesn't take a genius to build a Linux USB, plug it in, change the boot drive. If the hard drive isn't encrypted, you've pretty much got open slather to the data without really having to break a sweat, I guess. So I guess the first thing we need to do is dive in and build a couple of dynamic groups. So I've taken a quick recording of how I would build one of them, which is the Surface device group designed for the DFCI policy. So first thing is you do need to log into your device management portal. So devicemanagement.microsoft.com. This is the portal I try to live out of now instead of going through the Azure portal. I just find this portal has been laid out a lot nicer for managing the different platforms, for managing the security and the reporting side. So this is definitely the place to live now if you're an Intune fan. Now I talk in the pure Intune world, so I haven't done this. This isn't a hybrid deployment with SCCM. So it is pure, I guess, cloud only Microsoft Endpoint Manager here. So one of the first things we have to do is build the dynamic group. So from Endpoint Manager, click onto the group on the left-hand side. I've already got a pre-built group that I made. And one of the things I'll do is I'll jump in and just show you the rules. So the rules here that I've got are device models. So if you look up any Surface device in Intune, in the endpoint on the devices, you will see them actually coming down as a device model of what type of Surface they are, whether it's Surface Pro 7, Surface Laptop 3, Surface Pro X. So the rule here I've got is a dynamic device rule that just looks up if these are one of these Surface device models that is supported for the DFCI policy that we want to deploy, it will then show up in this dynamic group. Now, dynamic device groups, once you build them, give them 24 hours to populate. I tend to do it a day before, come back, and it's all done. There is sync time. It's not instantaneous. It takes time for it to poll through all the devices and pull information based upon your logic rules. So again, a second device group I tend to build is just a standard all Surface device build. And that looks like it's just looped. It's all right. So policy one, once we have those groups built, the next step is to start looking at our policy. So the first policy I always develop for Surfaces currently is the device firmware configuration interface policy. This is the policy that lets you control what happens with the UEFI. This is where you can control settings, lock it down, things like stopping USB sticks, stopping, turning off cameras if you want to. There's quite a few little options you can trigger on and off. And there are some options there that Surfaces can't use. So one of them is CPU virtualization and IOP virtualization, and also network boot. So those two toggles there, turning on and off, will not do anything on your UEFI for a Surface device. For me, the biggest unique thing here is this is one of those products that actually lets you manage a device end-to-end properly. A lot of platforms, or a lot of MDM platforms, will manage the device to a level. Very few of them go into the actual firmware management. And this is, to me, has always been the unique value of Surface, is the fact that Microsoft, is building the tools to manage these devices end-to-end, all the way through. Now, hopefully one day people, other OEMs will see this and go, wow, we should actually work with products like Endpoint Manager or Intune to build and enable this into our systems as well. So hopefully one day a Dell device will be able to manage the same way using one of these device firmware configuration interface policies. But for right now, it is for Surfaces. The other thing is it is in preview still. So, as always, use at your own risk in production. My experience has been I have not had an issue with it currently. But again, preview technology, it's always a risk factor, and it's weighing that up from a business point of view. So an example of setting that policy up. First thing is go into Windows, name your policy. Now that can be whatever we need it to be called. Device firmware, description, do some good things and actually put it in there. Why is that video showing up weirdly? That has shown a weird build. Let me just quickly pull up a build into Intune, just so I can show you that configuration. Not sure why that video has changed, but that's okay. This is the fun and games of live events. So one of the biggest things there is you want that policy. We need to jump into Intune. We jump into Endpoint Manager. If we then dive into the actual policy, ideally you have multi-factor set up, so you protect your environment, always a good security measure. And very quickly, I go to my device type. I choose my Windows platform because that's what I'm working with. It's a configuration policy. I'll create a profile, choose Windows 10, and I go down and choose this device firmware configuration interface. Hit create, pop through a couple of names at work. This is the configuration settings. This is the thing that matters. So on this configuration is, this is the big one here. We definitely don't want to allow local users to change UEFI settings. So let's set that to none. This one here doesn't matter for Surface devices. Cameras, do I want to enable? Yes. Microphones, radios, definitely. Boot options, I probably don't want to boot from a USB or SD drive. So let's disable that. And this one here doesn't matter. So once we've done that, you have your scope tags if you need to. You switch into your real rules to actually see what will apply, and you go through and create that policy. So create that. So you can see there on that slide review there, this policy here is we don't want anyone to be able to make changes. We tick it through it, off it goes. The next policy I always set up is a Windows Hello policy. This is one of those policies that is about making life easier for an end user, while also improving security. This Windows Hello policy, is going to set up a PIN. It's going to enable the biometrics authentication, which makes Surface wonderful. I know there's nothing better than coming into my office, sitting down, just hitting the button on my Surface, and it logging me straight into Windows 10. I don't have to mess around with passwords. I'm not messing around with the PIN code. It makes my life easy. And in IT, it's about making sure we make our users' life easy. Why not sacrificing things like security? So it's that balance between usability. And for me, this is a policy that you've got to have. It's an amazing tool, and the Surface devices do it extremely well. So make sure you set this up. Now, with that policy, also make sure you check your ICT documentation and your internal policy documentation around things like ping lengths. Does the company have a policy that they have around what the length of the pin needs to be? And that's where I always recommend, again, update your ICT policy. Now, that will throw through. And it's about looking at these tools and things. So again, from an IT point of view, make sure the policy aligns. Make sure you're not setting yourself up for a potential compliance issue. So document. So very quickly, from a policy point of view, if we pop into the next one. So again, we go through, we choose our configuration policy. We choose our Windows 10 platform. The type of profile we need to choose here is identity protection, and we create this profile. From there, throw in a very quick name based on what you want. Hit next. Now, this is where we want to turn this on. We want to enable this. And you'll see as soon as we enable this, there are a ton of different options. And this is where you need to refer back to your security policy and your ICT documentation around how have you set stuff up. Now, I just had a question come in, and what I'll say is I'll answer the questions just as I get through this content. Please keep posting them so I can have a read through them. And then at the end of the session, I'll jump through and go through all those things for you. So again, we go through and we can configure what we need from a policy point of view. So for an example is internally at NTAG, we have a minimum payment length of 6 and we have a maximum of 12. And that is a part of our ICT security policy for all systems. So I build this to suit what's required. Do I want things like pin recovery? Doesn't, yes or no. However, once I get down to the lower here, this is where things for Surface comes in. 1, turn on TPM. You definitely want TPM being used here. And all your Surface devices have them. So you're not going to have an issue there. Enable your biometric authentication. That's going to turn on the wonderful thing of Windows Hello, where that device wakes up, sees your face, signs in automatically. That can also include things like fingerprint sensors on other devices as well. So this policy that I'm building here is really being built for a Surface device. The identity protection extends to other devices as well. So make sure biometric authentication is on, because that's the greatest thing they ever invented, in my opinion, when it comes to signing into a device. So we let that keep rolling through. Again, scope tags if we need them. Then we come to assignments. So this is where we want to assign this to either a group of users or to all users. And at the end of that, we go through and hit create. Now, this is a policy that I would assign to users, not to the device. The policy before, the UEFI thing, the UEFI policy or the DCFI, I would apply that directly to a device. So that would be where that dynamic group comes in. This here applies to your users, because ideally you want this to apply to any device they use. And quickly, here's our competition week 2 slide. So again, scan the QR code to enter the prize draw. Any competition rules and prizes, please see the link on this slide here for the rules. And again, we'll kick on to, I guess, policy number 3. This is one of those policies that, to me, it is highly important when you start using tools like Intune, because this will dictate how your bandwidth handles the cloud. And I say that in the sense that if you've got 30 Surface devices sitting in one room, you really want to set this policy up so they can share information between each other, and not every single device has to go to the internet and download the full updates. So this is a bit like in enterprise Windows, we had bits to do intelligence sharing between Windows clients at enterprise level. They've brought this down into Windows Stack now, and they've built a policy using a different technology, but it's brilliant. So definitely this is one of those policies that just saves bandwidth, and anything we can do to save bandwidth improves the experience of the cloud for customers. So this policy I tend to set up to control how updates and apps are downloaded. The next step is how the bandwidth for these apps, for updates and apps, is managed. So during business hours, I don't want 80% of my bandwidth being able to use for an update. In fact, I probably want maybe 20% of my bandwidth being used for an update. And this is where I get to set these options here. And the great thing is any application you deploy in your company portal inside Intune or Microsoft Endpoint Manager also abides by these rules. So things like the Office suite. If you've got 30 devices in autopilot sitting in a desk, provisioning up for end users all at once, you don't want to be downloading 30 separate copies of Office. Ideally, you want it to download one and to share that information between all the different devices. And that's where this policy comes in. And again, like I said, it's about the control is really, business hours and outside of business hours. And that's where you get to set these policies. So I'll jump in and we'll go through a quick policy. So again, we'd jump into our Windows configuration policy. We tick that through. We select the platform, Windows 10. Profile type, it's a delivery optimization profile. Hit OK. We put a name in, whatever that name is, and we drop down into here, and this is where we have some different modes. So we have a download mode. Wonderful. We have bandwidth optimizations. We have, if we want to delay downloads, if we have caching policies, the list goes on. So if we choose download mode, we choose, here we've got some different options here. So maybe I'm in a place where I don't want devices between different subnets to share because I've isolated my subnets off for a certain reason. Maybe I want peering behind the same NAT. Maybe I don't care. This is where I go through and set these settings. Maybe I just want everything just to download directly from the internet, and I can set that. Or if I'm running things like the Windows 10 bits in the background to do stuff, I can turn bypass mode on, which means it will refer to the bits policies on the device. Now that's more of a hybrid build. In a native cloud build, you know, you're probably going to go HTTP blended behind the same NAT, to be honest. You know, if you're going to do internet peering, you definitely can. But from our point of view and from my experience, the NAT seems to give the best performance for customers. And it sort of strokes a bit of their security concerns because devices aren't sharing across the internet with other devices. You know, this is just their devices are sharing in that NAT, which is what they like. So it makes them feel a bit safe and sound. So with this one here, I'll choose behind the NAT. I then get to set things like peer restrictions. So do I want to set a restriction of subnet masks? So it's only going to be certain subnets behind these NATs sharing, and that's where I go through this restriction. My next step is bandwidth. So how do I want this bandwidth to be done? So do I want absolute or percentage with business hours? When I deploy this, I always go business hours. Ideally, I want to manage how much bandwidth, you know, I'm using during the business to manage backend systems like updates, like applications. I want to give the best experience to the end user. I want the person, you know, if you've got a link in, I want that person to be able to use that link, especially in the age that we're in, where everything tends to be a cloud technology. You know, bandwidth is important. It's a consideration we have to take into planning, and it's something we need to spend our time and build. So I'd go through, we set our business hours. So we're going to set it 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Once I get there, my next job is, because I've chosen percentage, I can now choose when and how much percentage I want during in and outside of business hours. I tend to find this one's easier than doing actuals, mainly because everybody's going to have different link sizes. Unless you live in a really uniformed organization where you can do actuals, you probably, a percentage is going to be what you want to work with. So I tend to always do percentage when I'm deploying this for customers and even us internally. So we set different percentages. Here an example is I've set 30 and outside I've gone 80. I've then gone background. So the one thing you'll notice here is there's foreground download and background download. I get to control the percentages on both. And that's important because again, you know, things in the background, I might want more or less. Once I do that, if I need to have any delays in how it downloads before it switches to HTTP, I can do that. If I have caching servers, even down to things like RAM controls. So once I create that, again, scope tags if I need them, I assign this to a group. This I would assign to probably a user group or a device, or to be honest, it could be a device group as well. So for this one here, I'm going to just apply this to all my Surface devices. I don't care what user logs into this device. I want this policy to apply to it. So once that policy is done, we create it, moves on to the next. The last policy for me that's really, really important is your Windows update policy. You want this policy, especially for Surface devices. Windows updates is how these devices get their firmware updates. You know, and we go back to that unique value proposition. Windows updates is the thing that allows you to manage firmware updates for Surfaces, and that is unique. You know, if you have another vendor, you've got to go to their website and use their tools to get their firmware updates. Microsoft is deploying this as a part of the Windows updates. So build a Windows Update for Business policy and apply it to those devices. The other thing is it's going to let you do things around controlling quality updates and feature updates. So quality updates, that is based around patches and hotfixes. Feature updates is when they go to a new feature set, like between 1909 to 2002, for example. They're the feature updates, and they tend to roll out. I think they're changing the cadence lately. It used to be nearly every quarter they were rolling out something, but I think they've now changed it to once a year. But who knows, that cadence changes based on user feedback, information feedback. But the update policy is important because you want to make sure for a Surface device, you pretty much want to be on the latest feature pack where possible, because they tend to roll firmware updates that are suited for that feature pack for that device. So, if you need the latest firmware to stop things, to stop issues with services, which Microsoft does go through and patch any problems really well. Get yourself on that latest feature update so you get the latest firmware updates. You can also then enforce updates as well, and enforce when the device needs to restart. And that's key there, because again, we go back to some of the old update management tools. Some could be really, really brutal, where it just midday, hey, guess what, user, you now have to reboot your computer. Here's 5 minutes to close everything, bang, done, good luck. It doesn't create a positive user experience. And being able to set when an update, and more importantly, set, I guess, a deadline where the update where the reset has to be done, but actually going, hey, user, you should restart now, or do you want to schedule when to do this reboot? And letting the user control when that reboot happens is important. But on the flip side, we can also set a maximum time going, hey, at this point in time, you just need a reboot, bad luck. You've wasted the opportunity. We've been really nice. We've tried to help you, but now it's just going to have to go. So the next policy I always do is the Windows Update Business policy. And again, in Endpoint Manager, we jump in and we go into our Windows. Straight down to update rings, down that bottom, we create a profile. The other thing I'll note there is this profile can actually do things like insider rings as well as standard. So you can use this to build yourself an insider ring. If you have a few users who really who are power users, love being on the latest and greatest, you can set them on things like your insider fast and slow rings. And it's a good way to make that an opt-in program. It's a good way for you to test stuff internally. If they're the type of people who can deal with stuff going wrong, that's kind of the program for that. But in this case here, we're just going to build a semi-annual channel. So go through, we definitely want product updates. We want Windows drivers. Do we want to set deferrals before we get these quality updates? So maybe we want to be a week behind. Maybe we want to be a day behind. That's really up to you. And again, refer back to your ICT policies around your update requirements. From a security point of view, you might have to be on the latest quality updates, but you might actually have to defer feature updates. So it's important to go back to your documentation here and build these policies to suit, or update your documentation to suit the policies you've built. So here we've got a quality update. We're just going to leave that 5 days and we'll put 30 days there. Do we want to set an uninstall date period for feature updates? Potentially. We might want to let a user roll back out of the feature update if it's just destroying their life. There could be some line of business application that just doesn't like that latest feature update. So, giving the ability to opt out and roll back is a way to go. And, with a Surface device, it's a pretty easy process built into the Windows OS, which is great. From a user experience setting, this is the one that I actually really love that they put into this policy. And this is one that a lot of other systems I just found doesn't have this control or build policy into the system for you. So being able to do things like when we want to do installs of updates. Windows has maintenance time settings that you can set now. So this is where you can go through and go, hey, maintenance time is going to be outside of Windows, or maybe it might be a 1 hour block over lunch that's 12 to 1 that all this stuff can happen. Again, build it to suit what you need. From here, we can go through auto install, maintenance time. You can see there's a few different options there. Choose the one that works the best. Again, you see down here, we can do an auto install and reboot without end user control. You know, that's that slap in the face. Guess what? We're rebooting now. Avoid it where possible, in my opinion. My opinion is do things like auto restore and restart at maintenance time, or restart at a scheduled time. So give the user the choice when to schedule it. And again, you can still set that maximum time of how long they can defer that reboot for before it's going to do it. But it's a nicer experience for an end user. From here, set our automatic behavior. So maybe we want it every week, any day, schedule time, choose whatever time is going to work for you when you want that to be scheduled. Restart checks. So again, do you need the device to restart? Do you want the option to pause Windows updates? So do you want to give the user the ability to stop those? Probably not. I wouldn't do it on a Surface device because this is how it gets firmware updates. So if there is a critical thing that Microsoft has pushed out a fix for in firmware, you probably don't want your users to stop in getting that. Especially in this day and age when everybody is at home and not in the office. It's a vital thing there. You want those devices up to date, especially from a security point of view as well. And then things like, do you require approval to dismiss restart notifications? So that's pretty much popping that thing up down the bottom of the screen going, hey, this device needs to reboot. The user can't just ignore it. They've actually got to action it. They've either got to go yes or no, or schedule a time. So this means the user can't just, you say, oh, I never saw this thing. They've actually actioned it, which means, you can pretty much go that, we treat users sometimes as a bit dumb when it comes to updates and stuff like that. In my opinion, is they just want to do their job and they want to do it well. So giving them those options in the power to go, hey, actually, I can't update now because I'm in the middle of a really important project. But end of the day, I'm going to schedule an update and that device will reboot. And that's important. Again, how often do we want to remind the user? So set that into it. I tend to set 2. And then remind user to require to auto restart with a permanent reminder. So that is when the device is going to have to update and reboot. You want to set that going, hey guys, you've got 30 minutes and this device you've reached the end of life. It's time to go. You've got to go up. And then we drop down into things like deadline settings. So this is the if a user is just ignoring these updates and going, nah, putting the schedule off, never actually rebooting, this is where you can go, guess what, it's happening. This is the deadline we're going to allow before this update must be done and the reboot must happen. And that's that deadline settings that you go through and set up and build. So again, selected. So for this one here, I'd assign it to a device level. I want the device always being up to date no matter what user logs in. It just helps reduce policies on the device. And again, we go through and we create that policy. So I guess looking at this, what have we achieved? We've got 4 core policies that I recommend for your Surface devices. And we've secured the UEFI to stop tampering or potential boot drive loads. We've made life easier for an end user by enabling things like biometric logins. We've controlled how the updates are going to occur on the device, ensuring that it's going to get the latest firmware updates, it's going to get the decent quality updates when it needs it, and it can get feature updates within a reasonable time. And we've also then controlled how updates and apps are shared with other Surface devices on the same network, right? Which is just going to reduce that bandwidth needed. And it's important at that point in time. We definitely want to drive that there. So these 4 policies for me are really the core ones I focus on when I'm doing a Surface deployment for a customer. All the other policies out of that are really quite customized based upon the business. But these are the 4 core ones that I always recommend you deploy. So what I've done here, I've just got some useful links up here, which has some documentation to all the different policies we went through there, as well as a copy of my blog where I've got some other stuff diving into things like CSP policies and a bit more customized stuff for customers. But have a look at these links, they're definitely useful to do. And what I'll do now is I'll start to pop through some questions. So if you have any questions, please post them now. And what I'll do is I'll just switch across to the last slide and maybe get my video thrown back on. So looking here, I can see one of the questions that came through was, I'm not a technical user. How can I share this with my IT team without insulting them? That's probably a bit of a hard question there to answer. Get them a link, get them to have a look. Go, hey, maybe I found a way that, you know, this can create a nice user experience while making your job easier to manage these devices. That's probably the way I'd approach that there from that point of view. It's not so much not about insulting. Just go, hey, here's a way that can make everyone's life easier. Otherwise, look, thank you very much. There doesn't look like to be any other questions coming in. If there are, please post them now. Otherwise, look, thank you very much to our sponsors here on this slide. And it's been great talking to you guys all about, I guess, Surface devices and how and why Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Intune is the tool you should be using to manage these devices. Thank you very much.